Hello, Langley High School, class of 2022. This is Hannah Wolff, the College and Career Specialist at Langley High School. I am going to be walking you through our senior night presentation, and hopefully we'll answer some of the questions or concerns that you had coming into this process. And whatever we don't cover this evening, feel free to reach out to me or your counselor to kind of get next steps and directions. So let's get started. The college process. I think I say this to students and families every year. The college process is confusing. It can be unfair. It can be really rewarding. It can be really disappointing. The big thing to know in starting out this process is we use the term or the phrase, it depends a lot. Every school does things a little bit differently, it seems. And once you think you understand how it all works and you've got this down, everything changes. So that's kind of where we come into play to help you walk through the different steps and to support you along the way. So as of right now, I've met with a fair number of students who have said to me, I'm so behind, I don't know what to do, I'm panicked, everyone else has got their applications in, everyone's already going to college, which is entirely not true. And they're in very good shape. I mean, I think the reality is in this process, the transcript, is kind of one of the biggest pieces, and you're pretty much done that. And a lot of students have tested, and we'll talk a bit about testing and test optional later on. And really, the last big thing you have going on is the actual physical application process and kind of deciding where you'd like to apply. So that's kind of where we're at this point. I think a lot of students have created a list of schools and are potentially in the process of narrowing that list down. I would say historically, we've always said, if you apply to between 6 and 8 colleges, it's a very good range. Some students certainly apply to less, and then we have some who will apply to 1 early and be admitted, and then they enjoy the rest of senior year. And then we have others who may apply to a larger volume of schools. I will say with COVID last year, with the pandemic in our midst, during the application process, we saw students apply to a few more schools. So again, it's sort of a case-by-case scenario, but if students have questions about that or parents do, we can certainly walk you through that. The other big piece is getting organized. You really need to figure out what information you need to complete these applications. What dates are things due? When do I need to submit things? What parent info do I need? Parents, a lot of students don't know what you do for a job, and that can be a question on the application. So just things like that are helpful to have in front of you when you're completing applications. A transcript is probably the most important, and I believe we have either sent one out to you or are sending one out to you so that you can complete that part of the application. Usernames and passwords. Every year, students forget their logins. You're going to have a bunch of different accounts. Once you apply to college, once you actually start submitting applications, you will get portal information for each school that you apply to, and you'll have to log into those. And so it's helpful to know what your logins are, put them somewhere safe, put them somewhere where you can access them easily. You never know when you're going to be working on applications. Some applications you can even complete on your phone, which is, it's a thing. So it's helpful to just have that information with you. Determine kind of the timeline deadlines, how you're going to apply. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a few slides. Are you applying early action, early decision? Should you wait to apply and apply regular decision? The college process really happens throughout the entire senior year. And that can be overwhelming for some, and for some a relief, because some students would like to have senior year grades factored into their application. Others are ready to go now. So that's something, again, that we can walk you through. And like I said, I'll talk about in a few slides. Testing. Are you sending scores? Have you finished your testing? Do you need it? So that's another thing to kind of decide. Which schools are you applying to? Are they test optional or are they not? And again, we'll cover that. Creating and updating an activities resume. This is not a formal resume that you need to go out and hire someone to help you complete. This is just an inventory of all the things you've done in high school, whether that's awards or honors or service, or you have a job, or you've done something connected to Langley, or heavily involved in church or something like that. It's something you can put down on a sheet of paper or maybe several. This is information that you'll need as well to complete your applications, and is also something that you will be providing your counselor when they write your letter of recommendation. Starting essays, and the essays are kind of the last part of this puzzle that you have a lot of control over senior year. So starting your essays, getting some things down on paper. You will do essay work in English class. So again, another thing that we will be supporting you with, and probably the part that's the most daunting to most students and takes the most time. So getting started on those is always a good step. College visits at Langley High School. Visit with your schools, visit with the schools you're going to be applying to. We will be doing a host of visits in person and virtual, and I will talk a little bit about that as well. And the one thing we can't stress enough are the deadlines. You really need to pay attention to the deadlines, getting your things in on time. If you've had flexibility in your life and you have not handed in on something on time and the teacher has been okay with it and given you a little extra time, when you apply to college, they're usually not giving you any extended time on those deadlines of getting your things in. So you want to pay attention to what is due and when, and did I get it on time? Because for everyone that you miss, there are thousands and thousands of other students who did not. So just something to pay attention to. Hopefully that doesn't put you in a panic, but just think I need to pay attention to my deadlines. Naviance Student, if you have not used this before, this used to be called Family Connection, and the name changed a few years ago, but Naviance Student is sort of where all of our college information is housed. It's where you'll put in your list of schools you're applying to. It will keep record of where we sent transcripts off to for your colleges. There's college searches on here. It also hosts the list of scholarship opportunities that's updated each week by Fairfax County. So it can be a really useful tool. It's a little confusing at times. They've changed the interface twice now, one on our end and one on your end. So again, if you have questions, just let us know. And apparently it works best through Google Chrome. So we'll cover that again when you're meeting with your counselor later next week. Okay, so college visits at Langley High School. We are offering both in-person and virtual. Last year we did virtual in the spring and the fall. We saw not quite as many as we normally do, but we usually hit around 250 school visits. I think this year will be closer to 150. I will say this, if your college that you're applying to is not visiting Langley, don't panic. If they're a school that is tracking demonstrated interest, or you have questions for them, we can find ways for you to connect with them. So where are in-person visits? They are in the Career Center. You will need to wear a mask. You can get a pass right outside the door of the Career Center. There's these big bright yellow passes. I'm not doing any of the scans, any QR codes. The teachers are pretty used to those big yellow passes, so you can just come grab one on the day of. Same thing with virtual visits. Those will also be hosted in the Career Center. They're only on Fridays though. So you have to remember, if I'm going to a college visit, if it's Friday, it's going to be virtual. So I need to bring my laptop and a pair of headphones because we will all be logging in together, but we'll be doing it in the Career Center. And that will allow you to ask the reps questions. So again, if it's Friday, I can't forget those two pieces. Getting a pass to attend, like I said, they're in the Career Center. One thing you need to pay attention to is that the passes must be signed by the teacher of the class that you will be missing. So let them know in advance. The teachers are quite good about this. It's kind of impressive. But I will say, if you're skipping out on a test, something like that, that's really not a reason to come to a college visit. You can always contact that admissions rep at a later time. So again, don't do that because then you get in trouble. Who can attend? The visits are for students only, and you have to be a junior or senior at Langley High School. So just know that. No parents allowed, sorry. Lists of college visiting is located in Naviance Students. I will also say that I will be emailing out the list of college visits. It'll probably show up in Schoology, and then I will email out who's coming each week. We still have schools signing up, so I haven't started that just yet, but I think the first visit starts the week of September 13th. So that will be coming out very soon. Visits will not be recorded. Students can contact admissions offices directly. If they cannot attend and have questions, I can certainly give you their contact information if you have more questions or you didn't get to come to the visit. Okay, so application types. There are several of them, but most commonly used is the common application, which is the second one down. We encourage you to use that one because it seems to be the most user-friendly, and the majority of schools are on it. Every school, state school in the state of Virginia is now on there. JMU joined this past year, and it's just much easier to use. And the counselors and teachers can upload everything very easily into the application. There is the coalition application, which a few years ago became sort of the rival application to the Common App. It was supposed to be more accessible. However, it sort of became more tricky to use that application. It isn't quite as user-friendly. I will admit this though, if you're applying to the University of Washington, they only use the coalition app. So you will have to log in and create an account if you're applying to the University of Washington. Everyone else, Common App, or there are school-specific applications. So Georgetown has its own application. We keep begging them to join the Common App, but hasn't happened yet. And the University of California system, the CSU system, and Texas state institutions have Apply Texas. There are also other schools, if you go on their website and you're looking under admissions and how to apply, that may offer the Common App in addition to their own institutional app. You should just use whichever one you want to use. You don't apply twice through two different applications, just to let you know that. Okay, decision types. So there are several of them, and I'll try to go through this kind of quickly. Hopefully this makes sense. I know we've covered this several times in different conversations, but now this is real and happening in, for you, you might have forgotten. So early decision and early decision 2, they're binding agreements. So if a student applies ED and they are admitted, they must attend that school. They've committed to saying, I am going to this school. Your counselor signs the agreement, your parent signs the agreement, you sign the agreement. Early deadlines, ED1 tends to be in November. And then there's also the option of an ED2. So sometimes students will apply ED1 somewhere. And if you're not admitted, then you might commit to go ED2 somewhere else. There are lots of different variations of this. Not everybody has ED2, not everybody even has ED. But again, it's a binding agreement, so students should really know, I love this school, this is where I want to attend. It's not the best idea to apply ED if you've never seen the school. I definitely had a student do that a couple of times, but that's kind of tricky. So you want to make sure you know that this is the school I want to go to. I would be super happy to attend. It's my top choice. There's no other school out there like it. So you can only apply to one ED school, and you can apply to other schools, other decision types, but you can't apply to 2 schools ED. The caveat there though is if you applied ED1 somewhere and you got denied or deferred, if you're deferred, then you become a regular decision applicant and that binding agreement is no longer valid. Then you could potentially, like I said, apply ED2 somewhere else. So for example, you could go ED to Virginia Tech. And then if you were deferred to their next round, then you could say, now I'm going ED2 at Tulane. And again, if you get into Tulane, then you would withdraw all other applications. Early action, non-binding, it really is just an earlier deadline, and you will hear back from the school earlier. Can be a great option for students who are just ready to apply. Their transcript is where they want it to be. Their testing is where they want it to be. and they're not feeling like they need to rely on anything from senior year to really be considered in their application. So some students will apply early action. Sometimes early action can be a competitive pool because it's full of those types of students. But it really depends on kind of your preference and when you'd like to hear. Restrictive early action is a very limited number of schools. It's not binding. So if a student is admitted restrictive early action, sometimes it's called single choice early action. If you're admitted this way to a school, you don't have to say, yes, I'm coming, and withdraw all other applications. You can just say, great, I'm in, and continue to apply to other schools. You can't apply early decision anywhere, and you can't apply early action normally to other private institutions if you do a restrictive early action. So again, an example of this would be if you applied restrictive early action to Stanford University, because it's one of maybe the 4 or 5 that offer REA, you could not apply early action to University of Chicago because it's a private school, but you could apply early action to University of Virginia, University of Michigan, University of Maryland, Georgia Tech, places like that. So again, it can be a little confusing. So if you have questions about that please let us know, and we can explain that. Regular decision, the deadlines are later. So you will hear later. You will hear by April 1st, but it gives students time to maybe get through midway through senior year, and potentially use their mid-year grades from senior year to be a part of their application. So some students will do that. So if you don't have all your testing done, or you're looking for some leadership roles or something during senior year, sometimes applying regular decision can be helpful. I will say the largest percentage of applicants that each college gets in the US would be during the regular decision application pool. So it's a bigger pool. Is it less selective, more selective? It depends on the school. But it's usually just the largest. Some schools only offer that one decision deadline. The University of Florida is an example of a regular decision school. However, their decision is early, it's in November 1. But then you have the University of California system. So schools like UC Davis, UCLA, UC Irvine, and they have one deadline, and it's a regular decision, and there's no other option you can choose. Rolling admissions, as soon as a student applies, they start, once the application is all there, they will start reading. So there isn't a set deadline. They admit until they're pretty full of applications and admits, and people have committed to going. So that can be a nice option if you want to hear really early on to a school. So some students will apply rolling to at least one school if they offer that option. Priority deadline. That can be, it's usually early on in the school year, and that is normally for scholarship consideration, sometimes honors programs, colleges. So some schools that offer a priority deadline, again, it's not binding in any way, but it could be an earlier deadline, and it can be when they make decisions on honors college or program candidates, or when they give the maximum amount of merit aid that they might offer. So that can be something to pay attention to. But of these decisions, only the ED 1 and 2 are binding. I think the biggest question folks have about the decision types is which is most selective, which is less selective, what will increase my chances. And the big thing is you will see sometimes with the ED schools, a more successful admit rate, not quite as small of a number, usually in the double digits versus single digits in terms of admission. However, you have to realize that for some of those schools, it's a smaller pool that are applying, and it could be filled with institutional priorities that a college may have. It may be how they bring in all of their student athletes. It's just something to pay attention to. So you really have to do what makes the most sense for you instead of being super strategic. That being said, there are some schools that, and again, non-binding, but offer an early action, and we will strongly encourage you to apply early action because they're filling seats as opposed to just admitting a class, which can be a little bit confusing, but ultimately They could fill up, specific programs really quickly. An example of that would potentially be Virginia Tech or University of Maryland. We'll see with like their engineering and computer science that sometimes we will strongly encourage students to apply early. Purdue is another example where we may see that. But again, I don't want to spend too much time on the slide. So if you have questions, feel free to ask. So the components of the application, the biggest one is that transcript. And there's also more schools have moved to what's called either an SRAR or an SSAR. It's a self-reported academic record. So some schools, in lieu of the transcript, will ask students to fill out all of their transcript in a form that they use. You have to create an account and put all that information in there, but it helps a college recalculate your GPA the way that they'd like to see it. So some schools are offering that option. We will send a transcript to all your schools regardless, in case they need both. Virginia Tech uses it, Penn State uses it, University of Tennessee. There's a whole list of schools. Clemson uses the SRAR, and then the Florida system has the SSAR. Again, something we can walk you through when you're doing your applications, but just know it's a newer component. Testing is another piece of the application. We'll talk about testing in a little while, kind of cover that and what test optional means and what kind of happened, what transpired after COVID or during COVID, I should say. Your activity section, for schools that are paying attention and reading a little more holistically to everything on your application, you will put in all the things you're involved in outside of the classroom. Teacher recommendations, there's also counselor recommendations, and then the actual application and the essays. So those tend to be the major components. There are students who are applying for performing arts, visual arts, that might require a portfolio, or an audition. So there are other pieces that could come into play, but these are kind of the big ones. So let's talk a little bit about testing. I know folks are really concerned. Do I test? Do I not test? Who's test optional? Who's not? Test optional for 2021, 2022. There's been a major commitment to do that for another year for most places, which is wonderful. When it's been hard to access testing sites and you don't feel like sitting in a room wearing a mask, taking a test. So majority of places will be test optional. Every school in the state of Virginia is, most of the places where our students apply are committing at least one more year to test optional. Some have a longer span of time that they'll be doing it. Some colleges and universities have just committed to being test free or test blind, meaning they just don't look at them and they will never look at them if they don't have to. There are a few places that are continuing testing. University of Florida, or I should say the Florida state system, never let go of testing. So they will still be required. If you're applying to a state school in Florida, you will be required to submit testing. The state of Georgia, state schools in Georgia went back to testing. The service academies, and then there's a handful of other schools that are requiring testing. Most others, if you don't feel confident with your scores or you're not happy with them, you don't need to send them. If you have questions about that, you can certainly ask your counselor or myself. I always think rule of thumb with test scores, if you look at the Naviance data and you look at the average test scores submitted by a Langley student that was admitted, if you're not above the average, you may not want to submit test scores. Sometimes if you submit and they're too low, it can hurt you. If you have solid test scores, it can't hurt, but this is another year of if they're not where you want them to be, it's okay. I definitely saw students admitted to places with no test scores, everything else looked great, and they weren't great test takers. So something to think about. And like I said, just ask if you have questions. We are offering a fall test date. So that's the next slide. So we'll talk about that. If you are applying early to schools, sort of maybe those November 1 deadlines, November 15th, December 1, and you are taking a fall test, you just want to check with the school to see that you'll be able to include those scores into that decision process. Some schools want everything there by the deadline. Others can be fairly flexible about testing. You also want to pay attention to, and this is another really valid point, even with test optional schools, if you are applying to an accelerated medical program, or maybe you're applying to a specific STEM major, you want to make sure that you aren't required to have test scores for those programs. Sometimes even schools that are test optional still are requiring it for those majors or programs. So just confirm that. You will send test scores directly to the college. This is done through College Board or ACT. There is also the option to self-report test scores within the college application. You can check to see which schools are requiring them officially sent and which ones you can just self-report, because then you don't have to give more money to College Board or ACT. AP scores are not required for admission. That means that you do not need to send official score reports until you're matriculating to a college. So in June and July of senior year, after you've graduated, then you would send your scores off. You self-report them on an application if you'd like, but they're not required for the admissions process, the official score reports. So again, don't send College Board your hard-earned money. One thing to know about tests, if you are submitting tests, send them early on. It can take a few weeks for them to process, which seems strange because you're just clicking a button and hitting submit. But it can take upwards of 3 to 4 weeks. So if you can send your test scores a month before the deadline, that's always useful. But again, you can also check with your schools to see. Okay, there is an essay opportunity in the school day at Langley High School. To participate in this, you need to apply by Wednesday, September 8th, so a week from today. And then on Wednesday, October 13th, we will offer it to seniors at Langley High School, and it is covered by FCPS, which is convenient. Essay option subject area test not available during the SAT school day, so just pay attention to that if you need it for your school. To reserve a spot, you have to complete a form. It says below, but there was an email that was sent out with this information. And this is SAT school day intent to participate form. So I think that's going out in the email that we're sending you so that you can sign up for that. And again, make sure you're using your fcpsschools.net email account to actually complete the form. Okay, the activity resume, I talked about that briefly. Everything you've done in high school. It has to be when you're in high school. If you were a rock star in middle school, elementary school, it should not go on your application. Everything is 9th through 12th. That being said, if you played the piano for 17 years, you would be very young when you started, you can put that you played it for that amount of time, but when you're actually completing the application, it's only looking at 9th through 12th. The more detailed, the better. Whatever you want to put is wonderful. I will say this, acronyms can be painful if a college doesn't know what the activity is that you are doing. So it's always good to just spell it out. I say this from experience of reading applications in a different part of the country. And I had no idea what some of the acronyms that students were talking about because it was regional. So just know that a college may feel the same way. Your email address. Your email address should be professional. So if you've not created one, if you haven't started one, you should do that now. Create an account just for your college stuff. Make sure you check the account, but that's certainly a great thing to do. We would recommend that you do not put your fcpsschools.net email address on anything for college, because once you leave here, it goes away from you. And if you're not great about checking that one, create another one, create a personal one. Make sure you're checking your email. Every year, colleges are reaching out to students. We understand you're getting inundated with lots of email, but it's something to pay attention to when you get to college. You're gonna have to check your email for a lot of different reasons. But also if you're missing test scores or something like that, and when you are going to confirm that you've gotten everything in and you have a college portal, once you've applied, you need to check your email to get that login information. So it's just useful to keep checking that. Again, don't forget passwords, codes, usernames. super, super important. Never forget the year that a decision came out for, I think it was JMU, and a ton of students didn't have their logins. And when they called the school, they called JMU, they said, you're calling from a cell phone. This isn't the number that was on your application, so we can't give you any help. And so students had to wait it was in the morning, one day at school. And so they had to wait the whole school day before they could go home and find out their decision. You don't want to do that. Okay. Teacher recommendations. Who should I ask? When do I ask? So with your teacher recommendations, because we were virtual most of last year and students didn't feel like they got to know their junior year teachers, historically, we've always said junior year teachers are the year to ask because it's the most recent classroom time that you've experienced. So that's what students have done. This year, it's kind of open season. Colleges are saying, please ask a teacher that knows you well. It's helpful if they're in high school, so please don't go to a middle school teacher. But 9, 10, 11, it's all kind of fair game at this point. There are some schools that, depending on the major you apply to, a STEM major may want to see math or a science or something like that, or a combination of. But if you never got to know your teacher, it's really not that fair. So I would say that the recommendation is please ask teachers that know you best. That's just going to be the better letter for a college to read. Hopefully you've all asked at least 1 or 2 teachers and you feel pretty comfortable about that. Also check to see how many letters of recommendation do you actually need for all of your schools. Some colleges don't read letters of recommendation. Some only want to see 1. Your counselor is going to write a letter for you as well, so you'll already have that letter. So sometimes that combo of 2 is certainly sufficient. When should you ask? You should have probably asked in the spring when we encouraged you to, but there was a lot going on. So you want to give the teachers at least a month to prepare and to actually complete those letters of recommendation, because they're busy and they're writing for lots of other students potentially. So give them enough time to get it completed comfortably and they're not rushing and just sending something off quickly. Majority of letters of recommendation are going to go through the Common App, which the teachers know how to use. You will send them an invite to the application and they will get a link in their email and then they'll fill out their part and just upload it in. There are some that may want paper. There are some that are, like I said, on the Coalition app. However, University of Washington, they don't need letters of rec, so you really shouldn't need to use that one for that purpose. The other thing to know about letters of recommendation is when you're completing your application, you have to read the FERPA regulation and either waive your right to see your letters or not waive your right to see your letters of recommendation. If you say, I do not waive my right and I want to have access to my letters of recommendation, most teachers will not write for you. If you say, I waive my right to see my letters of recommendation, then they will happily write for you. But they don't want you reading their letters of rec. And you should be okay with that process, because if you trust them to write a letter, then you should be confident that you don't need to view it. So again, something to pay attention to. If you don't waive your right and you want to see your letters, some colleges won't even read the letters of recommendation. So please make sure on the application you say, I waive my right to see my letters of rec. Application and essays. You're telling your story. I think we say it over and over and over again. I don't want to say that it's hard to stand out in the admissions process, but there's a lot of applications and a lot of stories, and you just have to be yourself. It's as simple as that. So your transcript and a test score, yes and no. If you are more pieces than that, you are more to that process. So we do say that you want to make sure you're not trying to package yourself too much to be some certain type of character or person, but just be authentically you. It should read like a 17 or 18-year-old completed the application. Please know that as well. They understand you're a high school student, but just be you. Tell us what you want to tell us. It's not shared amongst millions of people. You can be a little bit vulnerable if you'd like to. Sometimes those are better applications, but you should just be you. I will say this, and I think I say this every year. I've had students, one in particular, who said to their parents, I can't believe that you never let anything bad happen to me, because now I can't apply to college because I have nothing to write about. And that's not true. Not everyone has to have a sad story. You just have to tell us where you're from, what you've done, who you are, what you're excited about, what you hope to do next. I think that's really important. So again, essays, big component, probably the part that stresses students out the most, probably stresses parents out even more so. But it should sound like the student's voice. It's really important. Senior year English teachers are working with students on essays. I think they do a fantastic job in this building with their essay support. So if students, just follow through, get the work done, ask for feedback, we can certainly in this building help you. If you are using an outside resource, just helpful to let us know so that we're all on the same page, so you don't have too many eyes on your essays and kind of sending you in too many directions, because in the end, it's your application and they're your essays. So counselor's role, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, if any at all. The counselor sends off all of this information for students. They're going to cover this in Langley Links, and they also recorded videos each counselor did individually, and they'll cover all of this information. If you don't have a counselor, that information is coming soon, and you'll be able to watch that video as well. Important deadlines. Again, these are for the counselor only. These are for sending off all of those pieces we just showed, the transcript, the school profile, secondary school report, letters of recommendation, that sort of stuff. So students need to get their information by then. Does that mean you have to have your entire list of all your schools by September 17th if you're applying early action somewhere? No. There are a few schools that have an October 15th deadline, some of the southern schools. So students just want to be aware of that. But if you only have just your first few schools, that's okay. You can always add your other schools as the process goes on throughout the year. Making appointment to counselor, senior checklist, all of this information is coming out. Senior packet and deadlines, that is coming out through email. We mailed this out to you in the spring, but more information will be coming directly from your counselor on all of this. The transcript, hopefully you've seen one of these before. How we send it, again, that's through Naviance Student. So you'll see all this. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this information. Colleges I'm thinking about, how you put your colleges in, delivery types, where's your stuff? Did it get there? We talked a little bit about that portal, that once you apply, colleges will set up a portal for you and you can access it and check your information to see if they have everything or if things are missing. Notifications from college, how that all works. And then let's go to College Ethics 101. So that middle section I just kind of rushed through. It's just because it'll be redundant if you hear it over and over again. So students, you'll have access to all that information directly from your counselor. That's the piece that you'll work on with your counselor. So a couple of things to just pay attention to. When you're applying to colleges, your transcript has to be accurate. So we want you to check it, make sure everything looks as it's supposed to. Errors happen, mistakes happen. So just make sure that all of that is up to date and accurate and where it should be. And same thing with that self-reported academic record. Don't lie on it because they will go back and verify it at the end with your transcripts, and students have been rescinded for putting in false information. So just be as honest as possible. If you have questions, if you're thinking, I took a summer class, is it the summer, I took it between sophomore and junior year. So do I put it with sophomore year or do I put it with junior year? We can walk you through that sort of information. Schedule changes. If a student is applying to college and then senior year, you decide you're going to change a class that's on there. So let's say you were taking an AP and now you don't want to take an AP. You have to let the college know that you changed coursework. And it's as simple as a quick email to the admissions office, just letting them know. It doesn't mean I'm not getting admitted, but they just need to know that things are correct and accurate so that, again, if you end up going to that school, they're not going to say, wait a minute, that's not what I saw when they applied. Transcript release form. For us to be able to submit transcripts, you need to complete that, again, coming from your counselor soon. We talked about waiving your right, FERPA regulations, self-reporting discipline. We're not going to report discipline as a county. We do not do that. So you just want to check, answer that question. I've had it twice now where students came into me in tears and said, I got a speeding ticket or I got a parking ticket, my parents want me to call the college. That's not the type of discipline we're talking about. So just check that out. It's right on the Common App, and it'll kind of give you more information there. ED acceptances, if you're applying somewhere early decision and you're admitted, you need to withdraw all your other applications. Every year this gets kids in trouble because they continue on applying to other schools. And then some colleges share lists of their decisions and students have been rescinded for that reason. So if you're committing, you're committing. So you just need to make sure that you understand that. Email etiquette, I haven't seen that being a major issue with our students, but please email from your own account and not your parents' account. It's confusing. And sometimes parents like to pretend they're their student and it's very obvious when it is. And I say this from speaking with admissions all the time that, we can see right through it. So please, if you're not sure what you need to say, come and see me, or you can talk to your parents and say, what should I say? But please be gracious, please be polite. I would say they try really hard to respond within 48 hours. However, a lot of admissions offices are spread pretty thin with budgets being cut, and a lot of them are traveling. So during travel season, they may not get back to you as quickly as possible. But again, if it's been several days and you haven't heard, let me know, and I can try to reach out on your behalf to see what's going on. Your grades do matter in senior year. So as much as I said, you could apply early decision somewhere and be admitted and then kind of enjoy the rest of senior year, I didn't mean you can enjoy it that much. Your senior year grades are still part of your transcript, and we do send mid-year grades off, and students have gotten in trouble senior year academically, and then we've had students be rescinded because what they were at the beginning of the year is not who they are at the end of the year academically. And when you're completing your common application or your other applications, you're saying, I verified that all this information is accurate, and suddenly it's no longer the story that it was. So continue to work hard, continue to get good grades. As I said, mid-year grades are sent automatically. Social media, please be careful what you put out there. I think we've seen in the past year past few years, but I think every year we see another sort of scandal or thing come out in social media where people were not behaving properly, and then they were either expelled from their institution or their decision was rescinded. So just be aware of that. Anything you wouldn't want your grandmother to see, you probably shouldn't post on social media. Keep your accounts private. That's probably the best advice I can give. Paying for college, we have a financial aid night coming up on October 7th at 6:30. It's virtual. Just sit right at home, take notes, have a snack, just rest. And we'll kind of walk through the different parts of the financial aid process. There are two different forms, the CSS profile, which you can access through College Board. Most schools don't use it. Most private institutions do use it to provide a more in-depth look at finances to help create more opportunities for more financial aid. And then there's the FAFSA, which is the Free Education for Financial Student Aid. And it doesn't cost anything to apply. And some schools, if you say that you are applying for financial aid, they won't consider the application complete without it. It's very few schools, but it does exist. So that information, October 7th, and they will walk you through the whole process. Scholarships available on Naviance Student every week. The Fairfax County updates this list. There are hundreds and hundreds of scholarships on there. I tell students, this is where your parents can be very helpful, is just researching scholarships for you. It's also helpful to ask your parents' place of employment sometimes offers scholarships. And then, searching online, there's definitely some websites. There's one called CAPEX that has a list of scholarships and some other resources. If you're paying a fee to apply for a scholarship, then it's probably not trustworthy. So please don't pay anything to apply to scholarships, okay? Last steps, remaining decisions are released in April. So really, if you applied to a school and you didn't get to visit it because of COVID and whatever else, but everything else about the school made sense to you, you can visit it once you've been admitted. I will say every year I have students who they saw it before they applied and they loved it. And then once they got in, then suddenly didn't love it quite as much because now they're back in control of the situation. And do I actually like this school now? So it's something to just, go back and see. Colleges have admitted students days. They sort of roll out the red carpet, make it as snazzy as possible. So it can be helpful to see that again through a different set of eyes. And you've kind of changed a lot over senior year. That the actual college application process really changes students. So again, it kind of wipes you out, but it also kind of helps you be more self-reflective. So make those visits before you're committing to a school. May 1st is the national deadline day. That's when students have to commit to a school. A few schools last year extended the deadline a bit. I don't know if we'll see that again this year. But May 1st is usually the I'm going to a school. What if I'm waitlisted though? So waitlists sometimes don't move. Sometimes they don't take students off the wait list. Sometimes they take hundreds of students off a wait list. You still commit May 1 to the school that you've bought the sweatshirt for. And then if you are admitted off of a wait list, which would be after May 1, then you would reach out to the school you had deposited at and say, I came off a wait list, now I'm going to X school. It's very common, it's not unethical, it's how the process works. Wait lists are there for a reason. So it's something that would happen after. What we don't want you to do is to say, I think I'm going to get off that wait list, so I'm just going to chill and I'm not going to deposit anywhere on May 1, because then you may not have a school to go to. So please don't do that. Final steps, you'll complete your senior survey. I will bother you over and over again if you don't, but it allows us to send your final transcript off to your college once you complete it. So that's the sort of last step. If you don't complete your senior survey and we don't send your transcript, you run into the issue of potentially not being able to register for your college first year classes. So please do that. And then we had a questions slide, but we are not in person. So if you have questions, like I said, the counselor component will be done in Langley Links next week. And then you'll also get a video with more information, I believe, and kind of final steps. So if you have questions or concerns, just let us know. You can also reach out to me as well. Hopefully this was helpful. And we hope to hear from all of you soon, and good luck with this process. Thank you.